Look at her face. You've seen her countless times. She draws 10 million visitors a year to the Louvre, is the face that appears on mugs, t-shirts, phone cases, history books. Probably the most recognizable painting in the world. But do you know why? A woman in a chair, head turned slightly, hands gently folded, wearing a modest dress, no divine glow, no crown, and nothing mythical at first sight. Yet, still we look at her and still we ask, why her? I'm of course talking about the Mona Lisa. Painted by Leonardo da Vinci, she wasn't actually named by him. He never explicitly titled his work. The most plausible explanation is based on a likely identification of the sitter as Lisa Gherardini, the wife of a wealthy Florentine merchant named Francesco del Giocondo. Mona was a contraction of Madonna, meaning my lady, hence Mona Lisa. Da Vinci began the portrait in Florence around 1503. He was in his early 50s, already a renowned inventor, engineer, scientist, sculptor, anatomist, and court painter, amongst many others. His life could be an entirely separate video actually, but for now let's focus on his career as a painter. For Leonardo, painting was never just painting. It was a merging of science and soul. To him, the human face was a mystery in motion, shifting with thought, with time, with light. To understand it better and to analyze it in depth, he actually dissected countless cadavers in secret, painstakingly studying the cheek, mouth, and face muscles to understand how each is affected by human emotions like sorrow, anger, and happiness. Besides that, painting was for him a way to seek for a universal language, one that transcended words and spoke directly to the eye and mind. After all, the Mona Lisa can be understood by anyone, regardless of what language they speak or where they come from. In that pursuit, the Mona Lisa became his lifelong obsession, and he did not rush to finish it. In fact, he likely worked on it for over 16 years, adding layers, adjusting details, observing, thinking, reworking it. He carried it with him wherever he went. Florence, Milan, then across the Alps to the court of King Francis I of France. It's probable he never considered it truly finished, since the painting was only achieved in 1519, the same year he died. This begs the question, what was so special about it? Well, first and foremost, technically speaking, the painting is impressive. There are no hard outlines, only seamless transitions between light and shadow. This technique is called sfumato, literally evaporated or smoky. Introduced by Da Vinci himself, it allowed him to create depth not through contour, but through atmosphere. The sfumato technique itself works by painting subtle and gradual blends of tones and colors, specifically so the transitions between the light and shadow of the painting are soft and almost imperceptible. No harsh lines or borders, everything seems to connect like mist or smoke. It somehow attempts to mimic on a two-dimensional painting how the human eye actually sees things in our three-dimensional world, and in the context of this painting gives it a lifelike effect. Other examples of painting using this technique include the Madonna of the Meadow by Raphael or the portrait of Bindo Altoviti. Notice how in both works the transition between the light and dark seem very subtle. That is precisely sfumato's core characteristic. Even in paintings that include more deeply pronounced darkness and light, like in the Nativity by Antonio da Correggio, the contrast is seamless and subtle. The edges aren't sharply defined. It actually seems like you're sitting right there amongst them. But maybe to explain better what sfumato is, I can show you what it isn't. A contrasting technique to sfumato may be considered chiaroscuro, literally light-dark in Italian. Here on the opposite, the contrast between light and dark is accentuated, sharp, and aimed at creating a dramatic contrast in a visual piece. You can view those side by side for comparison. I hope this was useful for you. But the Mona Lisa's uniqueness doesn't stop at its technical mastery. Central to her mystery is most definitely her facial features. Her skin seems to glow from within. Her lips curve with ambiguity, her cheeks soften into the shadows of her veil. The result is not just lifelike, it's alive. But to me, the most interesting details are definitely her gaze and her smile. The Mona Lisa doesn't confront the viewer. She looks at you as if you've interrupted a thought. Her eyes meet yours, yet do not seem to yield. Her expression shifts depending on where you stand, how the light moves, how long you look, but her eyes, they always look at you. Psychologists call it the Mona Lisa effect, or the feeling that a painting subject follows you with their gaze, no matter where you stand. But to me, the most interesting is her lips. There's something mysterious about them. In fact, the longer you look at them, the more serious she seems. Yet, if you look elsewhere, the background for instance, or on her right, from the corner of your eye, she seems to be smiling slightly, a slight smirk. In reality, it isn't just an impression. Leonardo did apply a substantial level of sfumato on her mouth area too. This means that once you lose focus from her lips, your peripheral vision darkens that area, and as a result, the shadowed areas become more accentuated, directly reinforcing her smile. To explain what I mean and to simulate what our peripheral vision does, look what happens when I apply a darkening filter to that area. Do you see it? When it's darkened, shadowed areas seem to connect to make a larger smile. When the image isn't darkened, clearly the smile looks significantly smaller. Although that's approximate because our peripheral vision doesn't really darken the area, but I think that that's a rough way to demonstrate the effect here. And that is exactly what our eyes and brain do unconsciously when we do not look directly at the lips of the Mona Lisa. This to me shows Da Vinci's mastery at blending science and art. But let's not stop here. After Da Vinci's death in 1519, the painting entered the royal French collections. It hung quietly in Fontainebleau, then later in Versailles. After the revolution, it was moved to the Louvre, and that is where it stayed up until today. Fun fact, the Mona Lisa was hung for 4 years in Napoleon's private bedroom. But besides moving location, she actually wasn't a cultural icon yet. Probably admired, respected, and noted by some art circles, but not by the general public yet. In fact, the world didn't really know her until the day she disappeared. On August 21st, 1911, a Monday, the Louvre is closed to the public. A worker in a white smock, Vincenzo Perugia, hides inside a supply closet overnight. At dawn, he emerges, takes the Mona Lisa off the wall, walks out of the museum with it under his coat. No alarms, no cameras, no one notices for about 28 hours. When the theft is discovered, Paris erupts. Police swarm the museum, newspapers across Europe print the story on the front page. People queue up, not to see the painting, but to see the empty wall where it was once hung. The absence becomes an event. The blank space becomes sacred. For 2 years she is missing, gone. Even Pablo Picasso is brought in for questioning. And in 1913 she resurfaces, hidden in a hotel room in Florence. Perugia had tried to sell her to an art dealer, claiming he was a patriot, that the painting had been stolen by friends, and that he was simply bringing her back home in Italy, where she really belongs. The art dealer didn't buy that story and called the police directly. Perugia served about 12 months in prison for that theft. The Mona Lisa then returned to the Louvre in triumph, now with an audience ready to worship her. She was no longer a portrait, she was an icon. And since then, the Mona Lisa has never left the spotlight. In 1963, she traveled to the United States, displayed under armed guard in Washington and New York. In 1974, she was shown in Tokyo and Moscow. Each time, tens of thousands lined up just to see her for a few seconds. She has also since been vandalized several times, with acid, hit with a rock, smeared with cake, splashed with teacups, but nothing touches her, nothing changes her. Besides being a technical masterpiece with hypnotizing facial features as well as being a stolen artifact, most importantly to me she seems to be unexplained. Da Vinci adjusted her constantly. It could be argued he couldn't finish a portrait, and maybe that in that process he couldn't explain her exactly how he wanted to the public. To be frank with you, to me personally, she was never an object of admiration. Seeing her young, I remember thinking that she's just a woman, nothing more, nothing less than that. And maybe I was right. Many people know that opposite her, in the room in which she's exposed, the Wedding at Cana by Paolo Veronese is hung, the largest painting in the Louvre. Arguably a much more detailed, much more imposing, and much more complex work of art. But maybe I was also wrong. In a world addicted to clarity, addicted to constant explanations, endless sources, citations, statistics, proofs, details, clarifications, she seems to offer less or even none of that. Under that light, the Mona Lisa is resistance. Maybe she exists with a purpose for us to wonder, think, and question her. To question art, and in that process to question ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, her power to force us to question ourselves is the exact reason why she became one of the most famous artworks of humanity.